The night I saved Daniel Kim's life, I wasn't being brave. I was being selfish. Because if he died, I'd lose my visa, my job, and the only life I'd managed to build 6,000 miles from home. So before you call me a hero, you should know. I did the math before I did the right thing. And honestly, I'm still not sure which one it was. Let me back up. 6 months before that night, I was sitting in the financial aid office at USC with my stomach in knots. My scholarship had been cut. Budget restructuring, they said. Very sorry, they said. And just like that, 2 semesters of tuition became my problem. I'm Nia, by the way. Nia Okafor. I came to Los Angeles from Lagos, Nigeria on a student visa to get my MBA. My mother, God rest her soul, she used to say, "Nia, go to America, get your degree, come back and change everything." She died 2 years before I got on that plane, but I carried her words like luggage I refused to put down. So, when a friend of a friend mentioned that a wealthy family in Bel Air needed a live-in house manager, someone organized, educated, discreet, and that the position came with visa sponsorship, I swallowed every ounce of pride my father raised me with and said yes. That's how I ended up in the Kim house. The Kim house wasn't a house. It was a statement. 12,000 square feet of Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling windows perched in the hills above Sunset Boulevard. The kind of place where the closets had closets, and the garage held more money and cars than most people see in a lifetime. Daniel Kim had built it, or rather, his family's money had built it. And Daniel had turned that money into more money. Kim Group, commercial real estate, development, some import-export stuff that nobody asked too many questions about. Daniel was Korean American, second generation, and at 34, he ran the whole operation with the kind of quiet authority that made powerful men nervous. I barely saw him those first few months. He was a ghost in his own house. Footsteps down the hallway at midnight, a half-empty coffee cup on his desk in the morning, the faint smell of expensive cologne lingering in the study. When we did cross paths, he'd nod at me the way you nod at a piece of furniture. Polite, distant, like I was part of the house, not a person in it. His wife, though, Hannah. Hannah I saw every single day. Hannah Cole Kim was the kind of beautiful that made you feel underdressed just standing next to her. Blonde, polished, always camera ready. She came from old Connecticut money that had mostly dried up by the time she married Daniel, but you'd never know it from the way she carried herself. To the outside world, she was the perfect socialite wife. Charity galas, designer everything, Instagram aesthetics so curated it could have been in a museum. To me, she was something else entirely. In 6 months, Hannah never once called me Nia. I was, quote, the girl. I was her. On her generous days, I was the help. She'd talk about me in front of her friends like I wasn't in the room. Or worse, like me being in the room didn't matter, because I wasn't really a person to her, just something that cleaned surfaces and answered doors. Make sure the girl presses my cream Valentino, not the ivory one. She mixed them up last time. You'd think someone with a college degree could tell the difference. I had a 3.8 GPA. I spoke 4 languages. My father was a professor of economics at the University of Lagos before politics forced him into early retirement. Back home, people called him Professor, with respect in their voices. Here, his daughter was pressing Valentino dresses and being talked about in the third person. But I kept my head down. I kept my mouth shut because every month that paycheck went toward tuition. And every semester brought me closer to the finish line my mother had drawn for me, from across an ocean and beyond a grave. I told myself 2 more semesters, just survive. But then came that night in December, and surviving stopped being simple. I was cleaning the upstairs study, the one Hannah usually kept locked, but I'd figured out months ago that old houses like this always have spare keys if you know where to look. I wasn't snooping, I was doing my job, but the heating vents in that house carried sound like you wouldn't believe. And the study shared a wall with Hannah's bedroom. That's when I heard it. 2 voices. Hannah's. Sharp, calculated. Nothing like the syrupy socialite act she performed in public. And a man's voice. Familiar, but Wrong. Wrong because it wasn't Daniel's, and wrong because I knew exactly who it belonged to. Tyler Park, Daniel's cousin, his right hand at Kim Group, the guy who showed up every Sunday for family dinner and called Daniel brother. They weren't just sleeping together. That would have been bad enough. What they were planning was so much worse. 3 more weeks, Hannah said. The insurance policy updates on January 1st. Double indemnity. 50 million, Tyler. 50. And then we can finally stop hiding. And you're sure this'll work? Tyler's voice was eager, almost giddy. Daniel's not stupid, Hannah. The man survived boardroom coups and worse. Because he trusts me. I could hear the smile in her voice, and it made my skin crawl. He doesn't love me. Hasn't touched me in over a year. But he trusts me. On Christmas Eve, during the family party, I put the ethylene glycol in his whiskey. Small dose. It mimics a heart attack. Doctor, Rosen is already taken care of. By the time anyone asks questions, there won't be any to ask. I stood there with a dust rag in my hand, frozen. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure they could hear it through the walls. Then Tyler said the thing that turned my blood to ice. What about the house manager, the African girl? She's always around. Hannah laughed. It was the coldest sound I'd ever heard. Naya? She's nobody. An immigrant terrified of losing her visa. Even if she suspected something, and she won't, she's not that sharp. Who's going to believe her over me? I'd have her deported before she finished the accusation. Nobody. She's nobody. I stood there for a long time after they went quiet. Minutes. Maybe longer. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing. And I'm going to be honest with you, because I think you deserve that. For 3 days, I did nothing. Not because I was gathering evidence. Not because I was being strategic. It was because a small, ugly part of me thought, if Daniel dies, Hannah inherits everything. Hannah needs a housekeeper who keeps quiet. My visa stays, my life continues. One man I barely know dies, and my entire future stays intact. I hated myself for thinking it, but I thought it. I sat with it. I turned it over in my mind like a coin, examining both sides. And then one night, lying in my tiny room off the kitchen, I heard my mother's voice. Not literally. She'd been gone 2 years. But I heard her as clearly as if she were standing right there. The way she used to stand in our kitchen in Lagos, with her hand on her hip and that look in her eye that meant she was about to say something you needed to hear, whether you wanted to or not. Nia, silence in the face of evil makes you complicit. I sat up in bed. I looked at my packed suitcase in the corner. The one I kept ready, always ready. Because when you're an immigrant, you learn to be ready to leave at any moment. And I made a decision that would change everything. Not because I was brave, not because I was good, but because my mother raised me, and some things go deeper than survival. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that saving Daniel Kim's life was going to be the easy part. What came after? That's where things got complicated. It was a Wednesday night in December, 4 days before Christmas Eve. I remember because I'd been counting the days until Hannah's plan. Counting the days I had left to decide what kind of person I was going to be. Daniel came home 3 hours early. I heard the Mercedes pull into the circular driveway from the kitchen, where I was wiping down counters I'd already wiped twice, just to keep my hands busy. Something about the way the engine cut off felt wrong. Too abrupt, too deliberate. Like he already knew something was off. I moved to the window and watched him step out. Black cashmere coat, the wind catching it. He stood there in the December cold, looking up at the house. And I knew, from the angle of his gaze, from the way his jaw tightened, that he could hear it too. Hannah's laughter, breathless, intimate, coming through the partially open window of the master bedroom, and underneath it, a man's voice, Tyler's voice. I watched Daniel's whole body change. His shoulders went rigid. His hand moved toward his hip, and I realized with a jolt that he was carrying. Of course he was. Men in Daniel's world always carried. I don't know what made me move. Maybe it was my mother's voice still echoing in my head. Maybe it was the math. Daniel dead meant my life destroyed too. Maybe it was something simpler. Something I didn't want to examine too closely, but I slipped out the servant's entrance and into the shadows of the garden before I could talk myself out of it. Be quiet, I grabbed his arm and pulled him back from the front door. "You need to be quiet right now." He spun on me so fast, I almost fell. His eyes were black in the darkness, and for one terrible second, I saw the man that boardrooms and business rivals were afraid of. This was not the polished CEO. This was something older, something dangerous. "Get your hand off me!" His voice was low enough to cut glass. "If you go in there right now, you'll either kill someone or get yourself killed. And either way, I lose my job and my visa. So just listen to me. Please." Not exactly a noble speech, but it was honest. And maybe that's what got through to him, because he stopped pulling away. "Who are you to—" "I'm the person who's been listening to your wife and your cousin plan your murder for the last 3 weeks. So unless you want to walk into that house and make their job easier, I suggest you hear me out." Silence. Just the snow falling and our breath making clouds in the cold air. Then Daniel said, very quietly, "Tell me everything." So I did. Right there in the frozen garden, with the sounds of his wife's betrayal drifting down from the window above us, I told him everything. The insurance policy, the ethylene glycol, doctor, Rosen, Christmas Eve, all of it. When I finished, he didn't move for a long time. I expected rage. I expected him to storm inside with the gun I now knew was at his hip. Instead, he asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. "Why should I trust you?" "What?" "My wife hired you. You've been in this house 6 months. How do I know you're not part of this? How do I know this isn't their plan B? Send the help to feed me some story. Get me out of the house so they can set something up." It was a fair question, a smart question. And standing there in the snow, I realized I didn't have a great answer. So I gave him the only honest one I had. Because if I were part of their plan, I wouldn't be standing in the snow, risking deportation. I'd be inside, warm, waiting for you to drink whatever your wife poured you on Christmas Eve. You want to trust me? Don't verify. But do it before the 25th. Because that's when they're going to kill you. Something shifted in his expression. Not trust. Not yet. But calculation. He was running the numbers the way men like him always did. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marcus, I need you at the house. Bring 2 guys you trust with your life. And bring recording equipment." A pause, because I'm about to catch a snake. And I want evidence before I cut off its head. Marcus Cho arrived 20 minutes later with 2 men in a black SUV. Daniel's best friend since childhood, his head of security, the one person in his orbit whose loyalty was apparently not for sale. Marcus was Korean American, built like a linebacker, with a face that didn't waste time on expressions it didn't need. He looked at me the way you'd look at a stray dog that wandered into your kitchen. Curious, suspicious. Not hostile, but not friendly either. Then he turned to one of his guys and said something in Korean. He thought I couldn't understand. Most people did. Could be a setup. Hannah hired her. Maybe this is the backup plan. Get the boss out of the house, away from witnesses. I answered in Korean. Not perfect Korean. I'd been teaching myself from textbooks and K-dramas for 6 months, and my accent was terrible, but clear enough. If I were part of their plan, I wouldn't be out here freezing. I'd be inside watching your boss drink poison on Christmas Eve. Marcus stared at me. Daniel stared at me. Even the 2 guys in the SUV stared at me. "You speak Korean," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. "I'm getting my MBA. I study things." And then, I swear this is true, the corner of Daniel's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not quite, but the ghost of something that might have been one if the night hadn't been so terrible. "All right," he said. "Let's go see it for ourselves." They set up recording equipment, small cameras, professional audio, and they snuck into the house through the servants' entrance. Me leading because I knew every creaking board, every squeaky hinge. Up the back staircase, through the storage closet that had a connecting door to the master bedroom. Through the narrow gap, we could see everything. Hannah and Tyler. In the bed Daniel had bought for their anniversary. Tyler's face buried in Hannah's neck. Their bodies tangled together in sheets that cost more than my monthly salary back in Lagos. I watched Daniel's face in the darkness. I watched something break behind his eyes. It was quick. A fracture. There and gone. But I saw it. This wasn't just betrayal. This was his blood, his cousin, the man he'd trusted for 8 years. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his hand, just briefly, just to say, "You're not alone in this." His fingers twitched. Then, so briefly I might have imagined it, they squeezed mine. Marcus recorded everything. The audio picked up all of it. Hannah and Tyler, in the hazy aftermath, repeating their plan like pillow talk. Christmas Eve, the whiskey, the doctor, the $50 million they'd split while Daniel rotted in the ground. When we'd gotten enough, Daniel led us back down and into his study in the East Wing. He poured a whiskey, then stopped, looked at the glass, set it down, untouched. "I'll kill them both tonight." His voice was flat, matter of fact, like he was discussing quarterly earnings. "And then what?" I said, before I could stop myself. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. Marcus, the two guys, Daniel. I was the housekeeper. I was not supposed to be part of this conversation, but I kept going, because stopping felt more dangerous than speaking. "You kill them tonight. Then what? You go to prison. They become the victims. The poor wife and the loyal cousin, murdered by the dangerous man everyone always suspected Daniel Kim really was. Their plan fails, but they still win, because you threw everything away on revenge. And me? I get deported as an accomplice. So no, you don't kill them tonight." Daniel looked at me for a long time. The room was so quiet, I could hear the clock on his desk ticking. "Then what do you suggest?" he asked. And there was something in his voice that I hadn't heard before. Not deference, exactly, but the recognition that maybe, just maybe, the smartest person in this room wasn't the one behind the desk. "You let them think it's working. You gather evidence that would hold up in any courtroom. You call someone in law enforcement who owes you a favor, and don't tell me you don't have one. Because I've been managing your calendar for 6 months. And on Christmas Eve, when your wife thinks she's about to become a very wealthy widow, you spring the trap. Legally, publicly, permanently." Marcus looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at me. "Youngjin Prep School," Daniel said to Marcus. "Remember Detective Reeves? The thing with his son?" Marcus nodded slowly. "He owes us big. Call him. Tell him I'm cashing in the favor. I want law enforcement present on Christmas Eve as witnesses." Daniel paused, and when he spoke again, something in his voice had changed, softened, almost. "My father built this family on fear. Maybe it's time for a different approach." His eyes flicked to me for just a second, just long enough for me to feel it. "So we had 4 days until Christmas Eve. 4 days to plan. 4 days of pretending everything was normal, while sleeping under the same roof as two people plotting murder. And somewhere in those 4 days, something happened that I definitely did not plan for. I started to know Daniel Kim. Not the CEO, not the ghost who haunted his own hallways, the actual person underneath all that armor. It started with the late nights. After Hannah went to sleep in her separate bedroom and the house fell quiet, Daniel worked in his study. And because he'd asked me to stay close, for security, he said, though I think we both knew it was more than that, I'd bring him coffee and end up staying, talking, first about the plan, then about everything else. He told me about his father, first-generation immigrant from Seoul who started with a dry cleaning shop in Koreatown and built an empire on ruthlessness and connections that didn't always hold up in daylight. Daniel inherited the machine at 25 when his father died, and he'd spent the last 9 years trying to make it legitimate without dismantling what his father sacrificed everything to build. "You carry your father's legacy," I said one night, sitting across from him with a mug of tea I'd stopped pretending to drink. "I carry my mother's expectations. Maybe we're not that different. Your mother wanted you to get a degree. My father wanted me to run a dynasty. Those are pretty different. Are they?" They both said, "Make something of yourself." They both meant, "Don't let my sacrifice be for nothing." He went quiet at that. The kind of quiet that means someone's hearing something they needed to hear. And I'll be honest, there were moments during those 4 days when I looked at Daniel across that desk, lamplight catching the angles of his face, and I felt something I had no business feeling. Not just attraction, though, yes, that too. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But connection. The kind that doesn't care about timing or circumstances, or the fact that you're technically still his employee. But here's the thing that kept me up at night. The thing I'm telling you because I think honesty matters more than looking good. I couldn't tell if what I felt was real or convenient. Was I falling for Daniel Kim, the man? Or was I falling for what Daniel Kim could give me? Safety, security, a green card, a life I couldn't build on my own, in a country that reminded me every day that I was a guest who could be asked to leave at any moment. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Not entirely. And if that makes you judge me, well, at least I'm being real about it. Christmas Eve arrived like a verdict, and everyone in that house was about to be judged. The caterers transformed the mansion into a holiday magazine spread. White flowers, twinkling lights, a Christmas tree that touched the 20-foot ceiling. It was beautiful. It was obscene. And in a few hours, someone in this room was supposed to die. I pinned the camera microphone device to the collar of my formal uniform. It looked like a button. My hands were steady. My heart was doing something that probably wasn't medically safe. Guests arrived around 7. I moved through the crowd with a tray of champagne, smiling the smile of someone who was not about to witness the unraveling of a murder plot on Christmas Eve. Hannah worked the room like she was born for it. Cream dress, diamonds at her throat, kissing cheeks with perfectly rehearsed warmth. If I hadn't heard her plan her husband's death with my own ears, I would have believed every second of her performance. Tyler was there too, playing the loyal cousin. At one point, he clapped Daniel on the shoulder and said, "Family first, right, brother?" And I almost dropped my tray. Daniel arrived late to his own party. Sharp black suit, quiet confidence that shifted the gravity of the room the moment he walked in. His eyes found mine across the crowd. One second. A silent question. "Ready?" I gave the smallest nod. Detective Reeves was already there in plain clothes. Marcus's men were stationed by the exits. The trap was set. At 9 o'clock, Hannah called for attention. She stepped onto the platform beside the tree, glowing, radiant, the picture of a devoted wife. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Christmas has always been sacred to the Kim family. Daniel's mother loved this season. She believed in family, in tradition, in coming together." She gestured for Daniel to join her and handed him a glass of champagne. One she'd poured herself, away from the bartender's station. My pulse went through the roof, but before she could make her move, Marcus was there. Smooth, casual, bumping into her with an, "Oh, so sorry, ma'am." In the shuffle, the glasses were switched. The poisoned one was already being sealed into an evidence bag behind a potted plant. Hannah didn't notice. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "To tradition, to the year ahead and everything it holds." "To family," the room echoed. Daniel raised his glass, but he didn't drink. Instead, he spoke. "Actually, before we toast, I have something to say." Hannah's smile flickered. Just a fraction. "Darling, maybe after—" "No, now." His voice cut through the room like a blade. The temperature dropped. You could feel it. Everyone could feel it. That something was shifting. Something irreversible. "You talk about family, Hannah. About tradition. About what my mother believed in. Do you know what she believed in most? Loyalty. That betrayal was the worst sin. That traitors deserved no mercy." Hannah went pale. "Daniel, what are you—" "Tell me, Hannah. What's in this glass you just handed me?" He held it up. The champagne caught a light from the tree. "Champagne! Obviously." Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. "Are you feeling all right? Maybe you should sit down." "Marcus," Daniel said calmly. "Test it." Marcus stepped forward with a small chemical testing kit. He dipped a strip into the champagne Hannah had poured. The room watched in confused silence. Seconds later, the strip changed color. "Ethylene glycol," Marcus announced, his voice flat and clinical. "Antifreeze. Enough to kill a man in 12 hours. Symptoms mimicking cardiac arrest." The room erupted. Gasps. Someone dropped a glass. People physically stepped away from Hannah like she was radioactive. "You're insane," Hannah hissed, but her voice was cracking now. "This is some kind of setup. I don't know what—" "No setup, just the truth." Daniel gestured, and a projector screen descended behind the tree. Video began to play. Hannah and Tyler together. Their conversations, planning his murder. The money trails. The offshore accounts. Every detail displayed for 100 people to see. Tyler tried to run. Marcus's men were already blocking the door. And then Hannah did something I didn't expect. She stopped pretending. The mask came off. Not the guilty mask, but all of them. The socialite. The gracious wife. The woman who smiled for cameras. What was underneath was raw and furious, and God help me, honest. You want to talk about betrayal, Daniel? Her voice shook the room. What about the 3 miscarriages I went through alone because you were handling business? The night I called you 17 times from the hospital and you sent your assistant to check on me? You didn't marry me. You acquired me, like another property in your portfolio. The room was dead silent. So, yes, I wanted out. Maybe I chose the wrong way, but don't you dare stand up there and pretend you were a husband to me. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And standing there, holding my tray of champagne, with hands I couldn't quite keep steady, I felt something I did not expect to feel. I felt sorry for her, not for what she did. Plotting to murder someone is plotting to murder someone, and there's no backstory that makes that okay. But for how she got there, because I'd seen it too. The empty house, the cold bed, the way Daniel could make you feel like the loneliest person in a crowded room without even trying. Hannah was a monster, but monsters don't just appear. Something makes them. Detective Reeves stepped forward with uniformed officers. Hannah Cole Kim, Tyler Park. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and embezzlement. There was no applause. Not like in the movies. Just heavy silence as 2 people in handcuffs were led through a room of guests who couldn't make eye contact with anyone. The Christmas tree kept twinkling, indifferent to all of it. The cops took Hannah away at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone to avoid looking at her face. After the police left, after the guests filed out, after the house fell quiet, I found Daniel in his study, standing by the window, staring at nothing. "It's done," he said, without turning around. "It's done. She was right, you know, about some of it. The miscarriages, the phone calls. I wasn't there. I told myself the business needed me, but the truth is, I didn't know how to be present. My father taught me to build, to acquire, to win. He never taught me how to just be with someone." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like a platitude. She was going to kill me. His voice cracked on the last word. And the worst part of me understands why. He turned around, and the vulnerability in his face took my breath away. This was someone who'd just watched his life projected on a screen for strangers to judge, and had to accept that the villain of the story might also be, in some small way, him. Why did you save me, Nia? Really? I'd been asking myself the same question for weeks, and I owed him the same honesty I'd been giving you. Because if you died, I'd lose my visa. Because my mother raised me to not stay silent. Because somewhere in the middle of all that, I started to care what happened to you. And I still can't tell you which reason was the real one. Maybe all of them, maybe none of them, but you're alive. And I think that matters more than my reasons. He looked at me for a long time, then he nodded. Not happy, not satisfied, just accepting. Like he understood that messy honesty was the best either of us could offer right now. The days after Christmas were strange and heavy. The story hit the news. Not national, but LA local media ran with it hard. Wealthy socialite and business partner arrested for murder-for-hire plot. The kind of headline that lives on the internet forever. My phone rang on December 28th. A Lagos number. My father, Nia. His voice was careful, controlled. The voice he used when he was furious, but too dignified to yell. I have been reading the American newspapers online. Would you like to explain to me why my daughter's name is connected to a man whose wife just tried to murder him? Baba, it's not what it... You left home to get an education. Your mother, God rest her, sacrificed everything so you could have a better life. And now you are on television, standing next to a man whose business dealings I can read about on Google. This is what your MBA is for? To be mixed up in this? I saved his life, Baba. And now what? You stay? You become what? His woman? His next wife? Nia, listen to me. I did not raise you to be someone's rescue story. Your mother did not die so you could trade one kind of survival for another. The line went quiet. I could hear Lagos in the background, the honking, the generators, the life I'd left behind. Come home, my father said. Softer now. Finish your degree online. Come home where people know your name. He wasn't wrong. That was the thing that kept me up at night. My father wasn't wrong. Daniel Kim was complicated and damaged and entangled in a world I had no business being part of. My father had watched my mother die and then watched his daughter fly across the ocean. And now he was reading about her in crime reports. His fear was love wearing a different face. But here's what my father didn't see from 6,000 miles away. I wasn't the same person who'd left Lagos. I wasn't the same person who'd walked into the Kim house 6 months ago, pressing Valentino dresses and answering to the girl. I'd made a choice. A hard, messy, imperfect choice, and it was mine. So here's the part where I tell you we fell in love and lived happily ever after, right? Yeah, it wasn't that simple. I didn't stay with Daniel. Not right away. I finished my MBA first. I needed to know that I could stand on my own before I chose to stand next to someone else. I needed to know that if I walked into that relationship, it was because I wanted to, not because I needed to. There's a difference, and it matters. Daniel respected that. He paid off my tuition. I fought him on it. He insisted. We compromised by calling it a loan that we both knew I'd never repay and he'd never collect. I moved out of the Kim house and into a tiny apartment in Koreatown with a roommate who played K-pop at 3 in the morning. It was loud and cramped and entirely mine. I graduated in May, top of my class. When I walked across that stage, I saw Daniel in the third row, trying to clap quietly. And on my phone screen, propped on the seat beside him, my father's face on a video call from Lagos. He was crying. He'd never admit it, but he was crying. Daniel and I, we're figuring it out. That's the honest answer. We're two people from different worlds who met in the worst possible circumstances, trying to build something real from the wreckage. Some days, the distance between Lagos and LA, between his world and mine, it feels like an ocean I'm not sure either of us knows how to cross. But we're trying. People ask me if I saved Daniel for the right reasons. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe my reasons were messy. Maybe they were selfish. But he's alive, and I'm still here. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the right thing and the selfish thing look exactly the same. And maybe it doesn't matter which one it was, as long as you do it. I spoke up. And everything changed. Whether it changed for the better, I guess I'm still figuring that out too.